Hey, everybody, let's get a quick audio and video check in. We should be good to go. All right, welcome to another episode of Charts and Coffee. All right, good to see everybody. Happy Monday, everyone. Happy Monday. Okay, let's get to it. All right, so again, welcome to another episode of Charts and Coffee for the 28th, Monday, December 28th, 2020 is almost in the books. All right, rise and grind. I love that. Good to see everyone. All right, let's get to it. So as always, gang, I'm going to start off with something a little bit different. And that is a quick look at the grains. So part of what I do here at Simpler is we do the Simpler Futures Room. And I want to just mention, and this is something we've been working on since October, which has been just sort of recognizing and accepting the reflation trade, and some of the markets that do well, as we've seen, are markets like materials. We're seeing high beta tech moving again. In other words, tech stocks, and commodities. All right, commodities tend to do quite well in a reflation trade, and you'll also notice dollar weakness. Well, dollar weakness and commodities, good old-fashioned grocery store commodities, oftentimes very overlooked, but markets that we should keep an eye on. Ones that we should keep an eye on specifically, just so you guys know, I want you to be fluent and fluid in multiple markets, and one of them is corn and beans, good old-fashioned grains. I mean, a part of our lives aren't touched at some point by corn and beans, right? And all the derivatives of, for better or for worse. But these are markets that continue to be double green, heading higher, very good, sound trends, okay? So keep that in mind, something that, if you haven't thought of before. So one other thing I want to mention, if you've thought to yourself, well, Rag, I don't trade futures, I don't trade commodities, no worries, just go check it out on your charts. And then you can also take a look at CORN, which is the Techrium Corn ETF, and SOYB. So there is a little bit of, thinking outside the box for some of you, also having a foot in the futures, but also the ETFs. And that's another really powerful thing. If you can understand the connections between all these markets, it just opens the whole playground up to things you can do. And additionally, if you think about the way in which there are many, many markets that have ETFs, right? That's another thing we do in Sector Secrets. It's another service that I do where we look at the options on stocks and the options on ETFs, and these are absolutely viable alternatives. So something pretty cool. And I wanted to share that with you all because I think this reflation trade is going to continue for some time. What I'm waiting for is the same thing I think a lot of you are waiting for. We'd love to see a correction. All right, so let's go ahead and take some questions. Thank you so much. Yes, we had a wonderful few days off and a nice Christmas Eve dinner and Christmas with my family. Real quiet. We kept it real quiet this year, which suits me just fine. All right, so request for mRNA, sure. So mRNA, also keep in mind that this particular stock is weighted within the IBB. We'll take a look at that together. Oh, sorry, IPO, and I think it's an IBB. I know it's in one of the I's. All right, it's an IPO. It should be an IBB as well. It's actually more heavily weighted, I believe, within IPO. And so, again, kind of going back to that ETF discussion, keep in mind that there's a connection. I bring this up because if you are interested in mRNA, I'm not as much, I wouldn't short mRNA, but I'm not as big a fan as I would be, say, ILMN within the IBB. And if we jump down to the IPO ETF, where again, it's also heavily weighted, think about relative outperformance. There's a lot of other things within the IPO ETF, including IPO itself, that I'd prefer to focus on in lieu of mRNA. But that being said, I sure wouldn't want to short this one. The trend that preceded the current chop is up right? So respect the trend that was, and I would still look to the long side of mRNA. All right, let's see. Grain of salt. Your dad was a big utility and commodity trader in the 60s. I love it. Yeah, grain of salt. I started in 1989. So yeah, I've looked at some of the trends in commodities in the 60s and mostly 70s, 80s. 60s were a little bit further back than I can pull charts from back then. And those were these giant paper charts. Very cool. I love it. I love it. So that is the deal with mRNA. And Eric, the other question was Riot. Sure. What a great what a great symbol. Double green. I like it a lot, Eric. Waiting for a pullback. We might get a shot in Riot at the 8 exponential moving average. So I'd keep that in mind. We might get a shot at the 8 exponential on RIOT. All right. Next up is liquidity. Hey there, Trisha. How is the liquidity in SOYB and CORN? So the liquidity in the ETFs is actually pretty good. And how are you? So as far as, I guess also more specific to what I'd want you guys to look into to take advantage of the leverage is looking at the option chain. And yes, the option chain, if you go out to February, which is where I'd focus on for the CORN, and terrific question. If you're looking at the CORN, yeah, the liquidity for February 19 is certainly sufficient. Yeah, and I'd be looking at the 12 strike, 13 strike, 14 strike, and there's good liquidity there on the call side. So totally fine with that. I like it a lot. Tesla? Could I do a breakdown of Tesla? Oh, for today. Well, let's take a look at what we've got in terms of structure on Tesla. Double green. Definitely want to stick to the long side. We've had some bounces, as you can see, off the 13 exponential moving average. So those are aggressive but valid places to look for a long position in Tesla. So then the 21 would be the next level I'd look at. Definitely double green means we want to look at the long side of this market. And as far as today goes, well, let's take a look at a shorter term time frame. And this brings up another point, another aspect of my trading personally, which is if I'm not looking at a daily time frame, I'm absolutely looking at a 1 minute. So you can see the 1 minute here. And so if I can take advantage, so what you see on this chart, gang, is an indicator process that I created called HPMR, is using hourly price movement range data. They're running it through a simple arithmetic process. So the data comes from AutoChartist. And if I can get a fade off one of those levels, I'd be fine with that. Yeah, I'd absolutely be fine with that. Okay. And, these are the kind of trades that I like to do in Sector Secrets, where I can take an individual stock like Tesla and I can look at the ETFs that it belongs to, that it's a part of, SPY, QQQ, and not only take advantage of the options movement, even intraday, gang. I like trading Tesla intraday. One of the neat things about trading Tesla intraday at the moment is I don't have to go too far out in terms of time. Remember, we pay for time. And for those of you that are wondering, well, how far out would you go in something like Tesla? I'd be fine with January 8. I mean, clearly we could play December 31, but I would actually, because of this week, it's going to be another week like last, where we have a truncated week, half-day trading, holiday affected volume. And so I'd go out to January 8 in terms of the expiration. So what laggards am I eyeing? And thank you for the question. Thank you. I appreciate that. Next up is, and thank you, David, for that. Nick asks, what are my laggards that I'm eyeing down for a possible, XLB? Sure, let's take a look at XLB on the whole first, and then we'll take a look at the individual names within it. Double green. It's one of the ETFs that I do like. This is actually a position that we do have and we put on in Sector Secrets. So I like this ETF as a whole. Now, I want to mention something, gang. And one of the reasons I emphasize ETFs is one, they behave a lot like the index futures. It's a collection of stocks, and it's minus the futures leverage. The behavior of an index, the behavior of an ETF is very similar, because within it, if you were to crack it open, within it are a lot of stocks, typically in high concentration weighting. The only issue with, the main issue with XLB itself, and one of the reasons XLB and XLC oftentimes are going to be supplanted by stocks that are heavily weighted within those ETFs, is the liquidity in the underlying option is pretty much crickets and tumbleweeds. There's just not much going on at all. XLB and XLC, and there's some rare exceptions where I'll say, look at the structure of the tide, but then when you go into the options chain, you're going to notice the open interest and volume are rather low. So that's where, again, what I'll say is, look at the structure in XLB, look at the individual stocks that seem to be tracking with it, and play those in lieu of the XLB. So one of my favorites here is actually Freeport-McMoRan. And I like Freeport-McMoRan for two reasons. One, it's tracking with XLB. And two, it tracks with, let's go back to that reflation trade conversation for just a moment. So a lot of you may or may not ever have looked at copper. When overall economies are benefiting from reflation, commodities are going to rally, right? Well, the two commodities that are very important to look at would be copper and crude, right? Think about amazing opportunities in those commodities. For those of you that are open to commodities trading, if you're not, one really cool way to play copper, a proxy, if you will, is Freeport-McMoRan. And so not only do I love the narrative of Freeport-McMoRan with copper, you can see here it's tracking very nicely with XLB. So I like that one a lot, and thank you for the question, Nick. That's the way that I would break that down and keep an eye on that. All right, next up is what are my views on the S&P, on the SPX? So Paul, whether I'm looking at SPX, SPY, everything is going to come from the ES. I'm going to look at the futures, all right? So with that being said, what I'll do is I'll focus on pullback buys. They haven't been coming often. The last one, and look, gang, buying the dip sounds great. It's much more economical. It reduces risk. You're buying something on a day where there's not demand for it, which is exactly what is at the heart of the way that I trade options, which is blue light specials. You know, we've heard that saying, rushing in when everyone's rushing out, or rushing out when everyone's rushing in, right? We've heard that. It's sort of this anecdotal, almost fortune cookie-like wisdom in the markets. Well, apply that to timing of your trades, and all of a sudden it makes sense, where if you're looking at the S&P like we have right here, and the market's moving down with an overall uptrend, that is buy the dip. That is absolutely buy the dip. So the idea is first being able to recognize the structure where buy the dip is valid, and then recognizing what a dip is. And so I'll wait for another dip. I love the structure. I'm long different components of it, whether that be more along the line of my sector secrets approach, which is individual stocks and individual heavily weighted sectors of the S&P, or whether that be the S&P itself, right? But I like it a lot. And what do I think it's going to do? I think it's going to continue to head higher. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to buy a breakout of, say, 37.25. However, my Momo traders out there, if you're comfortable with momentum trading, if that's your preferred way of trading, it is not mine. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, some people like chocolate ice cream, some people like vanilla. I like vanilla, right? Vanilla to me is that pullback buy. Chocolate ice cream, the setup would be high volume breakout through a resistance level. So a volume confirmation of resistance. So with that being said, I like it a lot. Yeah, Marty Jean, yes, NQ and ES are double greens. Love the pullback buy scenario. However, again, chocolate, vanilla, they're both great. Who doesn't like ice cream? If I can get a high volume confirmation of the breakout, we're right as rain. Yeah. So like that a lot, and very good observation, 100%. Joel asks about Microsoft, which is a very cool follow-up to S&P and NAS, because the cool thing here is if you have a NASDAQ and S&P moving higher, and if you have an XLK also moving higher, ideally you get Microsoft or Apple, and Apple actually, going for the ride. So in this case, Joel, one of the things that I talk about a lot is the idea that if we are looking at a sector, if we are looking at a index, I want the stock to be tracking with it. Okay, I want the stock to be tracking with it. So the thing to remember about something like Apple and Microsoft and XLK, and I know Microsoft was your question. The idea here is to remember that if it's a laggard, be really careful. I don't want to short it, but I'd rather see things that are tracking with that broader sector. Question is Riot, hey there, Alex, is Riot an ETF? No, Riot is an individual stock. It's called Riot Blockchain. It's a blockchain name. And it's got weighting in a number of ETFs. So you can keep an eye on that. Probably the one that I can think of it has the most weighting in is BLOK. I think it's BLOK block. But Riot, it's a stock. Yeah, it is a stock. Okay, so let's see. What else do we have here? What's my take on GE? What's my take on GE? It's a pullback buy. You know, stocks under $10, even a name as, gosh, hard to believe GE is an $11 stock. But stocks that are under $20, be aware of the short interest. Be aware of volume moves. And that's where I'd say you're probably even more susceptible to, look, here's a good tip, and we'll wrap it up with this. Relative outperformance of volume is going to be very, very important in sub $20 stocks. So I would keep an eye on that as much as I would keep an eye, on the structure and the movement itself, relative outperformance of the volume. Okay. All right, gang. And just like that, we have flown through our 20 minutes of charts and coffee. Thank you, as always, for joining me. Hope everyone had a great long weekend. Hope everyone had a Christmas that you are not. My mom was in Dallas and she completely gorged herself on Indian food, and she's still recovering from the meal on Friday. So I hope you guys are ready for a day of trading. Don't overtrade this week. We've got another holiday affected week coming up. Volume is going to be lower. Although, generally speaking, I do find this week a better trading week than the prior week. So it's a better trading week, and we will be looking at some day trades. All right, gang. So that's it.